Hey, friends, welcome back to the Life of a Makeup Artist podcast. If you are a new or returning listener, I am so happy that you are here. Today, I have an old friend on the pod. Her name is Sonia Elyss, and we have so much that we're going to learn from her. Sonia has been a beauty brand consultant for over 15 years, and she's been hiring creators for 10. Now, I know that there's so much we're going to talk about today, but before we get into all
Sure.
of that, how are you, Sonia? How's life?
Ah, life is crazy, but so good. I had a wild year this year. Just new baby, new mom. Just
Congrats. It's
thank
such a cutie pie.
you.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
thank you. And, just adjusting as an entrepreneur and a mom, it's like a wild world.
Right.
No one's there to tell you the exact hours and how to balance it all and maternity leave. So
Right.
it's been a crazy year, but, so happy.
I'm so happy that you are here. Thank you
Thank
for making the
you.
time
Oh, of
because
course. My
you are
pleasure.
booked and busy, honey. Okay, so my intro was quite short, but I would
hmm
love to have you introduce yourself
Yeah.
to your new friends.
Sure, no problem. So, Sonia Elyss. I have been in marketing for 15 years, specifically always focused on social digital content.
Mm-hmm.
Started a bit in the fashion side of things and then moved over to beauty quite early on. I really got a foothold by launching the first collaboration with influencers and fashion
Mm-hmm.
with Leander Medine of the
Oh,
Man Repeller.
amazing.
Yeah. So I launched her first fashion collaboration. And that's what really got me into the influencer and creator world. And that was
Mm-hmm.
very early on before creators really even had any sort of product lines, anything. I think it was 2014. So it
Mm-hmm.
was pretty early on.
Right.
Um, and from there, I moved to an agency here in the city, and I was the head of digital there.
Oh, wow.
For many brands, and primarily working with how do they increase their digital footprint. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that was digital marketing, influencer relations, a lot of events that were focused on creators,
Mm-hmm.
influencers attending, and .com media.
Right.
And I did that for about 6 years. And then I was just really burnt out, as many people in the industry become.
Right.
And I have always been very entrepreneurial since I was a child. And I really wanted to start something for myself. So I said, I'm going to give it a shot. And I left to be a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really sure what that was going to mean, but I knew I wanted flexibility in my life. I wanted flexibility for the people who worked with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely wanted more opportunity to take clients that I really liked.
Right.
And that started with my first client ever was Derma E.
Oh,
I
we love her.
know. Yeah. And I did a big influencer event for them here in the city. And then it kind of took off from there. I got introduced to friends at Clarins, and they used to be the holder of the license for Mugler
Oh, wow.
fragrances.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing a ton of influencer work for them and building kind of a social repertoire as well,
Mm-hmm.
managing social for brands.
Mm-hmm.
And it really just grew from there. And I think I'm almost at 7 years of owning my own business now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you.
That's a lucky number.
Thanks. I know.
Okay, so you're also actually within this time of you,
hmm
having your own business and being a consultant, you've
Yeah.
been hiring creators for 10 years.
Yeah.
So can we talk about like how that came
Sure.
about?
Yeah, so once I moved over to the agency, the creator world really started to blow up. You had some of your very first creators like Chriselle Lim,
Mm,
Rumi Neely, some of the kind of what I would call old school
mm,
people. And I was working with them very early on, inviting them to vacations that were sponsored by brands. I know this was like early on brand trips. Some of them were very janky and crazy.
right.
But yeah, we've been hiring ever since. I think the biggest year I had was maybe 2019, 2020. I was spending about a million plus on
Wow.
influencers for brands.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you didn't have your notebook out, now is the time. Now
Yes.
is the time to take out the notebook and take some notes. Okay. So we used to talk a lot on Clubhouse. This was like 15 years ago.
It feels like it, right? I was trying to even remember
Like,
the
what
app
was that
name.
term?
I was like, what was the name of this
Right,
app?
like
Oh my
I
gosh.
can't remember,
I
but
know.
what would you say is as someone who has worked with brands on all parts of
hmm
the back end of marketing and hiring creators,
Sure.
what would you say is some good advice for those trying to get into content creation?
Yeah. I would say the best advice I could give people is to start now. Start now. I think a lot of people wait because they're overthinking it. They
Mm-hmm.
think that there are too many creators out
Mm-hmm.
there and they won't be able to find a foothold. And I
Right.
don't think that's true.
Right.
While I've never seen more creators than there are now
Mm-hmm.
with, TikTok and YouTube, Instagram,
Right.
I still think that there's a place for everyone's voice if you are good at sticking true to what your actual voice is.
Right.
So that's why I think people really need to start as soon as possible, because I don't think people can show up authentically from day one. It takes a
Right.
while to really understand,
Right.
how am I different? How do I approach things
Right.
differently? I frequently tell, creators, self-development
Mm-hmm.
is one of the most important skills
Mm-hmm.
of being a creator, right?
Right.
Like the more comfortable you are with yourself, your vision, your creativity, the better your journey is going to
Mm-hmm.
be. So my biggest piece of advice is to start now so that
Mm-hmm.
you can really figure out what you like, what you don't like,
Mm-hmm.
and you can have longevity in that career.
Right. That's really good advice. When you say to, be true to your voice,
Mhm.
how do you find your voice? Like how do you, you're
Yeah.
you're like, I don't even know how the
Yeah.
app kind of works. Like it's always changing. Like how do I
Sure.
even find my voice?
Sure. I think finding your voice is really about understanding what feels good when you
Mm-hmm.
record it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my lip service group where I'm mentoring a lot of beauty creators,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them struggle with this.
Mm-hmm.
They're always stuck in a comparison trap, which happens in any industry, but I think
Mm-hmm.
especially in the creator world.
Mm-hmm.
And I really tell them, try to focus on what feels good in the moment,
Right.
because so much of being a creator is showing up.
Right.
And when creators feel force because they think they're trying to do a trend, they're trying to look a certain way
Mm-hmm.
that has made other people successful,
Mm-hmm.
that's what creates the resistance,
Right.
right? So when you're trying to force yourself into a
Yeah.
box, you start to say, this is not fun for me,
Yeah. You hate
and
it and you hate
exactly.
yourself.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And no one wants to feel that way. And
Right.
that's what causes burnout. That's what causes people to quit early.
Right.
And the worst thing that can happen is that you force yourself into that box and you become popular or you go viral for a piece of content that is not truly feeling good,
Right.
because then you are forced to cater to that type of
Right.
audience for as long as you'd like that virality.
Okay.
So I really think that understanding when you record it, whether it is a tutorial, whether it is a transition, any type of content, day
Mhm.
in the life, if you find yourself recording and editing it and just thinking to yourself, like, "Ugh, I hate doing this," like, stop doing
Stop.
it. Stop
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
That is not the road that you want to take, which is why it's so important to start now, because
Right.
there are so many different types
Right.
of content.
And I have to play around with it a little bit.
Exactly. And then see what feels good and keep going down that road.
Okay.
Hmm.
So, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Let's say, from inception, you started to create a bunch of different content. You
Hmm.
end up posting something that went viral.
Yeah.
You're a hair creator and you
Hmm.
posted something about, I don't know, a new car, and now you're viral and people want to see more of your car. What do
Oh
you do?
no.
Do you delete the video? Do you delete the
Okay.
video?
This is what I tell people when it comes to niche, because I think that this is relative to niche, right? So many people feel paralyzed when it comes to defining a niche because they're thinking like the car is only one silo and the hair is another silo.
Mm.
Try to figure out how you can mesh all of these worlds together. Just like in life, nothing lives on its own,
Mhm.
right? So perhaps it is creating hairstyles that are going to be complementary to having a convertible.
Right.
Maybe it is doing some sort of editorial with your cars where you have these hairstyles that
Right.
match the color of the car. I'm not
Right.
sure, but how can you integrate the two topics together
Right.
so that you don't completely alienate one audience from
Right.
another?
Right. Oh, the car has a lot of compartments that fits
Yeah.
all my hair products on the go.
Exactly, exactly, right? So it has to
Right.
somehow mesh together. If
Right.
you were creating everything in a silo and just like focused on only that one thing,
Okay.
that audience, when you post the other thing, hair, they're not going to relate.
Yeah, they're not interested.
But if you can mesh it together, I think everyone can get along.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you've, started to post,
Mm-hmm.
you're, becoming consistent. And, as we all know, when you're starting to build a relationship or, you're wanting to work with a brand, you
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, you want to make sure everything goes right.
Of
You want to
course.
please the brand. But I
Yeah.
think I would like you to share with us
Mm-hmm.
what are some questions that the creator should be asking in order for the brand partnership to go smoothly.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the most important parts. Once you've secured a brand partnership,
Mm-hmm.
you have to come correct, right?
Mhm.
Like you only get that one chance for a first impression at
Mhm.
that point, especially in a paid model.
Mhm.
If I've worked with someone and they're difficult to work with, they are not following the instructions that we've given, they're not reading the fine print,
Mm.
any of those things, there are so many creators out there that will. I am not hesitant to not come back to that person, right? So you really want to show up and ask any questions. Read the briefing very carefully.
Mhm.
I do hear from a lot of creators, which is very unfortunate, that a brand or agency didn't give them a brief.
Right.
If you're not given a brief, make sure that you write out in detail what your concept is for the
Right.
shoot, and make sure you get that improved in writing.
Right.
Because you should not be subject to reshooting
Mhm.
and a whole bunch of things if the
Mhm.
brand was not specific.
Right.
Talk about due dates. If you have any sort of issues with delivery, don't feel shy to say, hey, I need another day, or
Right.
whatever it is, as soon as the issues come up.
Right.
I've had so many creators wait until the day and then tell me about traumatic stories that have happened to them, cars getting broken into, all types of things. And I'm sure those stories are true, but I really wish they felt comfortable enough to say, hey, this is happening to me
Right.
and I'm going to need more time.
Right.
So we can better project manage that.
Right.
But I think asking as many questions as you can about the brand, about the product, the
Mhm.
ingredients. Ask for a tutorial call if you feel like you need it, especially if
Yeah.
it involves application, which
Right.
every beauty person is doing application.
Right.
Ask for that tutorial call with an educator from the brand, so that you're not doing anything wrong, and ask about the pronunciation of the product if you are unsure,
Yeah.
because so many beauty brands are French or
Yep.
synonyms or different things that people have a very difficult time pronouncing.
Right.
So make sure that you're really clear on every single bullet point before you record. That'll save you so much time in the long run.
Right. That is
Mhm.
really good advice. So, you're setting yourself up, you're creating the content,
Yep.
maybe you've done a partnership or two,
Mhm.
but now you are trying to figure out your bio and you made a post about this. You made a post about it and she was like,
I
what
did.
was that? What was it? Life? She's like, what is life?
Yeah.
Is
What is lifestyle?
lifestyle?
Lifestyle doesn't exist.
Yeah, like what is lifestyle? So
Mhm.
essentially, what are some tips you would give to creators, artists, trying
Yeah.
to expand? How can I optimize my bio?
Sure. I think keywords are very important when it comes to an optimized bio. So I offer bio audits for people, and the things I always look at is number one, the image. You want to make sure that your image is clear. I can see your face. I can tell what skin tone, what color eyes, all the details should be there in that image, very clear and upfront. And that image should be the same that you use across all the platforms so that it's
Okay.
easy to identify you
Right.
across the platforms.
Right.
Then from there, looking at the bio image, in Instagram and TikTok, especially when you're early on, I really feel like you should have your email in there.
Mhm.
So be considerate about how long you make your email, because that will take up a lot of characters.
I know I have a long ass name, so
I
like
know,
mine
that's
is
tough.
like, yeah.
But it's really hard for us when we're curating a list to find emails, and we're both on our phone and on our laptop, and we're like pressing copy and paste, and
Mhm.
it's just can be a huge mess. So
Right.
definitely put that email in there.
Yeah.
If you are a creator who would like to be attending events, make sure you put your location,
Mhm.
at least a general, close to
Mm.
the biggest metropolitan city that you're near, that you're
Mm.
willing to go to for events.
Right.
And then you want to focus on really synthesizing, what is this content about?
Right.
What am I trying to do here?
Right.
And if I find that your bio says beauty, lifestyle, fashion, I will come for you. I will come for you. That is not
beauty, lifestyle, fashion.
Fashion.
There was a point in time I had lifestyle. I took it off.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I want to actually dig deeper into that. What is
Yeah.
the real problem with just putting lifestyle? Because a lot of people
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I create lifestyle content because it's like
Yeah.
maybe I put my house or my I don't know cleaning or
Sure.
whatever.
Of course. So, yes, that is a lifestyle, but it's a lifestyle that is lived through a specific lens,
Mhm.
right? So, no matter who you are, maybe you are a stay at home mom
Mhm.
on a farm and you are navigating a journey, of fertility. I'm not sure. But the point is that that is your lens
Mhm.
that you're living your life through. And that is what your topic matter is about, right? Just like yours is the life of a makeup artist,
Mhm.
your lifestyle is that you are a makeup artist.
Right.
And then you get more detailed from there.
Right.
The lifestyle is the easy way out
Right.
when people don't want to sit and think like, what makes it specific?
Right.
Am I talking about this is my life as a mother of 3?
Right.
This is my life as a single woman in the city. This is my life as like, how are you telling the story?
Right.
Because if you leave it too broad, it's
Yeah.
not for anyone, right?
Right.
You want to attract a certain person to you, and that person most likely is going to look like you in
Right.
some way, right? Similar age,
Right.
similar income. Of course, it's going to vary, and there's also aspirational content. We also follow people who were not like it all,
Right.
but they're still portraying a specific life that can be described in a certain way
Right.
outside of the word lifestyle.
Let me go check my no.
I know. Go check your bio, remove it right now. And for a while, I was doing TikToks where I would say, comment on this, and I will tell you what type of lifestyle you
Right.
actually have
Right.
by watching, I think, maybe 6 pieces of content. I
Yeah.
can probably tell you.
Yeah, your comments were on fire. So I want to actually get into
Mhm.
just, let's just get into it. Let's
Yeah.
talk about money.
Okay.
Right?
Let's do
This
it.
is always going to be different for each person when in
Sure.
terms of like, how you're going to price yourself based on engagement, following size.
Yeah.
But I'd love your opinion on pricing yourself, especially as a new creator. Because,
Mhm.
even as a makeup artist, sometimes it's just like, okay, well, you don't want these people undercutting. But at the end of the
Sure.
day, you're new, you're trying to make it work. So what would you advise?
Yeah, pricing is the biggest issue I see that creators have when they come to me, constantly asking me how to price things. And like you mentioned, it's so difficult based off of what a client is asking for and what the usage terms are, how much content you have to create. But especially for new creators, one piece of advice that I give that I think is maybe unpopular is to wait to charge until you can reach a certain threshold, which I think is closer to $150 to $250.
Mhm.
Underneath that, the amount of work it is to charge for things versus the amount of income that you're going to make. I see creators quote $50 sometimes. By the time you have the back and forth with me, you invoice, you post all of these things, and you pay for taxes, you're taking home $20.
Right.
I feel like that's not worth your time.
Right.
So it might be better to start either by creating a package. I think for emerging creators, packages are so, so, so important.
Right.
If you are sitting down to shoot a piece of content, how much can you actually get out of that 1 hour session?
Right.
That's what you should be offering the brand. Is
Right.
it 3 videos and 3 still images?
Mhm.
What can you really create in that amount of time that isn't taking a ton of extra effort,
Right.
but is still very enticing for a brand?
Right.
So that for that 250,
Right.
you can get a very easy yes.
Right.
So I think it's more about being strategic about what do clients need, what do marketers need. Everyone needs more content. So I
Right.
think offering a bundle
Right.
at a lower rate when you are still beginning
Right.
is a really good way to look at things. And I really advise people to start at around 250,
Right.
100, 150, depending on your scenario, of course.
Right.
But until then, I've been on this big kick of talking about internship phases. And just like, I'm sure as a makeup artist, there was a time that you were an assistant and you got paid very little, right? You're
Yeah.
shadowing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's almost nothing. I was an intern for, I think, more than a year, not
Right.
making any money. there's no difference for creators,
Right.
unfortunately, right? Becoming a creator, even though you might be older, you might have a full-time career somewhere else, there is an internship phase where
Right.
you're just not going to get paid.
Yeah.
And part of that is because you're learning how to communicate with brands, what type of content is effective, how to sell to your community. Those are
Mhm.
all things that you're learning on the job, which is considered an internship.
Right. And you're also evolving as a creator as well.
Exactly. You're trying to decide, like, how do I sell myself to the world?
Right.
And once you've landed on all those things and you're starting to see incoming requests from brands,
Mhm.
incoming emails, steady PR requests, maybe invites to events, then you know, okay, I'm at this place now.
Right.
I'm going to start putting a number to things,
Right.
and I'm no longer going to take free X, Y, and Z,
Right.
or these are my goal brands and I might continue to take free from them, but these I'm going to remove, right?
Right.
We go in phases until you are a
Right.
full-time creator.
Right. So, you start building up, your brand partnerships and,
Mhm.
you're learning more, you're growing as a creator. What would you say is the best way to start building long-term partnerships?
The best way for me has been, wait, let me rephrase that. The way that I end up hiring creators over and over again is when they over deliver and they are literally so easy to work with. I think it's the same in almost every career path. When you're easy to work with,
Mhm.
you get rehired, you get recommended, especially when it comes to the beauty world. People move to other brands, but they don't leave beauty.
Right.
Right? Like, you're really ingrained. Once
Right.
you're in it, like, you're in it.
Right.
And I'm sure you've had this happen. Someone leaves NARS and then they pop up somewhere else, right?
Yep.
Especially when you have major companies like L'Oreal who own tons of brands. People go
Just
from
moving.
within,
Yeah.
they're moving from within that. So if you've made a great impression, they're going to take you with them to
Right.
the next spot.
Right.
So I think it's about kind of going back to your earlier question, asking those questions when you get the brand partnership,
Mhm.
showing up to events even when there's nothing in it for you, out of
Right.
good faith, out of
Right.
support for
Right.
that person that you're
Right.
building a relationship with. um Delivering on time, delivering analytics on time, invoicing on time. The amount of times I'm chasing people to invoice me, not worth my time. I'm
Right.
trying to pay you.
Right.
Like,
You want
invoice
this
on
money or
time.
not?
Exactly. So I think it's just thinking through what makes a successful partnership for a marketer, a PR person, a brand person, and how can I make sure that I deliver that every time
Right.
so it's a no-brainer for them to hire me again the next
Right.
time.
So I want to talk about TikTok.
Okay.
So oftentimes, consistency, it's great, right? But
Mhm.
when you're not seeing the views, you kind of get to this point of
Yeah,
what's the point? Like, what's the point?
I
How
got
do
it.
you how do you push past those feelings?
It really goes back to, are you enjoying what you're creating?
Right.
And you have two options at that point, I always think. One is take a break.
Right.
It's fine. There's so much content in the world, and I don't mean to minimize anyone's presence, but no one will miss you at the end of the day, right? Like,
Girl,
I'm
bye. Go take a
sorry.
break. We'll be fine.
I know, right? Take a nap. It's okay. The other option is to reassess, am I enjoying what I'm creating?
Uh-huh.
Because if you're not showing up with joy, the journey is literally heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You will be forcing yourself every step of the way, and
Yeah.
that is not worth it.
Right.
Right? So maybe you need a content pivot at that point.
Mhm.
I really hope that people do release their worth from the amount of views that they're getting if they enjoy what is happening.
Mhm.
And hopefully they enjoy the comments that they are getting, the
Right.
views that they are getting.
Right.
During those moments, I also really encourage creators to look back at their analytics from a year ago, 6 months ago. Is there anything that has moved since then? I
Right.
guarantee you there has.
Right.
The needle moves slowly sometimes,
Right.
and that's okay.
Right.
Not everyone is meant for viral growth.
Right.
And I actually encourage people to not wish for viral growth.
Okay, so that actually is my next question.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to go viral, but
Sure.
going viral is not always a good thing. So
No.
I would love to hear you, delve into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So, for example, I think just yesterday I hit 3,000 followers.
Congrats.
Thanks. It's not a big number.
Everything is worth celebrating.
I did celebrate. I was really excited, but I think in comparison on the creator journey, most creators may not celebrate 3K.
Right.
Right? They're like, I want 10, I
Right.
want 100, right?
Right.
But I know, and this is what I put in my caption, I know that of that 3K, probably 90% are creators or beauty brands.
Mm-hmm.
And that is who I want in my community at the
Right.
end of the day. So that makes me feel so proud that I built 3,000 of people that I want to surround myself with,
Right.
right? As opposed to 300,000, and over 50% of those are not people who are within my
Right.
industry. They don't share my same passions. They're not
Right.
interested in what I'm talking about necessarily.
Right.
So that's something that I would really consider creators focus on, is that when you see the new follows, if you head to that person's profile, do they seem like the type of person that you're trying to attract, right?
Right.
We were talking earlier about Gen X creators.
Mm-hmm.
If a Gen X creator is showing up and they're getting 100, 200, 300 views, are the new follows other people within their generation? Are
Right.
they speaking to the audience that's actually coming in, even if it's slow growth?
Right.
If so, that's a huge positive, because
Right.
many people go viral and they end up with tons of followers that
Mm-hmm.
are not within the niche that they want to be talking to.
Right.
What happens later on? You get a paid brand deal, you're trying to sell something, and no one is buying it because they're not the target market
Right.
anymore.
Right.
So that's kind of what I would say.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And, you just mentioned how, you might post an ad and,
Hmm.
your audience is not really into it. But even when your audience is into it, like, do brands take into consideration that the algorithms are always changing, and then
Hmm.
sometimes creators, their engagement is just down?
Yeah.
Like, how do they navigate that on the back end?
So on the back end, I think there's always different metrics that we're trying to measure. Especially now, most of the strategies that I'm implementing for brands are not just about engagement rate or sales.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, it's also about the quality of the content. Can we use this in other places?
Mm-hmm.
Are we getting good sound bites that really sells the product?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, I advise my clients, and I don't know that everyone does this in my industry. I wish they
Mm-hmm.
did, but I do keep them very mindful of what sponsored content engagement looks like versus organic content, right? Different engagement rates. And we used to, for a long time, for one of our brands, measure engagement rate based off of paid posts only.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd ask the creator to come within 1% of that,
Right.
which I think is very reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't come within 1%, we'd ask that they re-support on stories or in
Mm-hmm.
some other way if they
Mm-hmm.
could.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that goes back to being a good partner and wanting to have
Right.
a long-term partnership. I'm sure
Right.
if you posted something that did not perform as you might want it to,
Mm-hmm.
you'd probably share it to stories
Yeah.
again, right? Like without
Yep.
a charge.
Absolutely.
Like
Yep.
there's been many times where I've asked creators or I've asked their management, hey, could you reshare this on stories? It's not quite
Right.
doing how we would like.
Right.
And we've gotten the no, or they've asked for more money. And to me, that's such a turnoff. I understand that when something requires more work, if I
Right.
ask you to shoot an entire other video,
Right.
of course that's another
Right.
conversation. But hitting a small triangle to put to stories
Right.
is not more
Like,
work.
chill, sis.
I know.
Okay, so I love that you mentioned that, because I think, if, on the other side, if
Yeah,
you're creating that happens, you kind of want to go under a rock and you want to hide,
sure.
and so how would you continue to build on a relationship? Because you might be feeling some type of way. You don't really want to approach
Sure.
the brand. So, like, what would you
Mhm.
say is a great way to approach the brand,
Mhm.
after the fact, where you're like, damn, my content didn't even do well. Maybe they
Sure.
hate me now and they never want to work with me. Like, well, how would you navigate that
Yeah.
post communication
Yeah.
after the partnership?
First, start with telling yourself, I've done the best I can do,
Mm-hmm.
right? At the end of the day, you do not control the algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot control what happens after you hit post. If you put in your best effort towards the content, make it look like something that you would normally create, and you are really proud of the quality of that content, the amount of viewers and what happens after that is not up to you. So, really releasing that shame of it did poorly is the first step, and just saying,
Mm-hmm.
okay, how can I do my best now from here forward? And I do think I've had creators email me before I've even reached out and said, this is not doing as well as I would like it to. These are some things I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that shows huge amount of responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
that you're showing up and you're saying it first
Right.
before the brand is saying,
Right.
Unfortunate.
Right.
So I think being the person who makes the first move shows a lot of accountability towards your own business practice.
Right.
And then coming up with solutions. I'd like to reshare it on stories. I'd like to do a little live. I'd
Mhm.
like to take a different cut and repost it. Whatever you feel like is within the boundaries of your time and
Mhm.
availability for what you were paid,
Mhm.
I think is great. Come up with those solutions, what you feel comfortable with. And
Mhm.
by doing that and making the first move, you're not leaving it open for the brand to maybe pull some sort of a like reshoot it again, do
Right.
this, do that.
Right.
You're coming up with solutions that you feel comfortable with
Right.
first.
Right.
For sure, that's what I would do.
I love that. So we've spent quite a few, we've spent some time talking about creators, but
Mhm.
you spend a lot of time helping indie
Yeah.
brands with, their social and all the things.
Mhm.
What are some tips that you have for indie or smaller brands struggling with their social media?
Yeah, I work as a consultant with indie brands all the time,
Mhm.
redoing their TikTok and Instagram strategies. And what I find is that most people feel overwhelmed with the amount of content they need to create to
Mhm.
keep up, if you
Mhm.
will. What I always tell indie brands is to start with the very baseline of
Mhm.
consistency that they feel like they can bring to a platform.
Mhm.
So if that is every day, once a day, fantastic. If that's 5 times a day, 5 times a week,
Mhm.
wonderful, right?
Mhm.
Start with what is accessible as
Mhm.
opposed to sitting down with your strategy and saying, I have to do 3 times a day, blah, 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 to be
Right.
successful. That is not true.
Right.
Success starts with showing up regularly.
Right.
So I think that's the first step is really be honest with yourself and what do you have time for
Mhm.
as an entrepreneur, as maybe someone who only has 1 or 2 team members.
Right.
From there, I also really highly recommend getting comfortable shooting content that is maybe different than what you're seeing from bigger brands.
Mhm.
If it's you packaging orders, if
Mhm.
it's, someone in your family doing a try on, I think those early days are a great time for a beauty brand to test so many different types of content
Right.
that maybe bigger brands aren't doing because they just don't think that's aesthetic enough or
Right.
whatever else, right?
Right.
That grainy,
Aesthetic.
cool content is
Yeah.
what people want. And I
Right.
think on TikTok, especially, the TikTok community is so interesting because they really do want to champion people who are doing it out of the garage,
Right.
right? Like they pride themselves on finding that woman who is making her lip gloss at home in
Right.
little batches, right? So filming that, even if it's not perfect quality, and getting it up and showing that process in a
Mhm.
rough way, I really encourage people to do that and stop comparing yourself to brands that have big budgets, big teams, investment dollars.
Right.
There's a lot of beauty brands right now, I think, that come off as indie when they're not.
Right.
They're getting big checks,
Right.
um, and they want you to feel like it's indie,
And
but
it's scrappy.
exactly, it is not that woman making lip gloss in her.
Right.
Yeah, they're not that scrappy. So be careful being in that comparison trap as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think just being really tight on what makes your product different
Right.
and re-communicating that over and over and over again.
Right.
It goes for creators too, that statement, that point of differentiation,
Mhm.
it might feel annoying or cringy to keep saying it, to
Mhm.
keep posting it, feels too similar.
Right.
But I think the stat is about 80% of your content gets shown to the FYP first,
Mhm.
which are people who don't know who you are.
Right.
So if they don't know who you are and you just dive in on something and it's only really for people who already follow you,
Right.
not a great strategy.
Right.
So I think being really clear on the communication points that you want to be hitting on every
Mhm.
single piece of content,
Mhm.
very important for an indie brand.
That's really good advice.
Thanks.
I mean, do you do this for a living?
Sometimes.
I think you do. Okay, so the landscape of social media and all these
Mhm.
platforms and all these things are always changing.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone trying to actually make content creation real in 2024? Like, I need this to
Mm,
be a real stream of income. I need to
yeah.
pay bills with this. What would you
Mhm.
suggest?
I would suggest taking at least 1 week off to strategize. Yeah.
Not one day, 1 week.
Not 1 day, 1 week, and that means sitting down with yourself in a silo, maybe even deleting every single app so you stop consuming other people's content and you really focus on what makes me different in this space?
Mm-hmm.
And then become relentless about being that person when you show up.
I love that.
So I really think that not enough creators take time to really strategize.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens with brands too. You're so in it that you
Mm-hmm.
can't be outside of it working on it.
Yeah. It's
It
like
happens with
working in your
everybody.
business and on your
Exactly.
business.
Exactly. It's the
Yeah.
same thing, and it happens to me too. You know, I just starting to get to this point where I feel like, okay, great. I've built this community. I feel like I'm well known in the beauty space for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to kind of play with new topics now.
Mm-hmm.
What are those going to be?
Right.
But that was after a year of almost every single video is tips for beauty creators
Right.
or beauty brands.
Right.
I did not stray.
Right.
Right.
Now
So
I'm like, I see the fit check, honey. She got the fit check.
I
We need
did
deets
not
on the
stray.
if you're listening and not watching, there's this gorgeous lime green blazer on. We need all the deets. We need all the deets.
I know. So yeah, that's what I would really recommend is sit down and look at yourself like a business,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're not just a content creator, as some people might let themselves be labeled.
Right.
You're now a business.
Right.
And as a business, how are you going to run this business? Like, what makes you different? What can you offer to brands that is different?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can be a podcast host for them.
Like
So
super
many
fun.
people are starving for someone who knows what they're talking about
Right.
to lead content in a certain direction. So I think if you come up with these ideas and you can storyboard them, you know, you don't have to give away everything in a
Right.
pitch. But if you have already, like yourself, built some brand relationships and you're ready to
Mhm.
go to the next level, start thinking about what are these things that you can bring to the table
Right.
that would elevate a partnership.
Right.
I think one really good example, and this is of course on a very big scale, is when Michaela got married and she made that wedding lipstick that, you know, that was taking her already paid partnership relationship and
Right.
taking it to another level that
Right.
was so specific for her.
Right.
And I think that's a beautiful example of like how you can go from within your network. You're doing sort of like the regular sponsored post, the this, the that,
Right.
but you have the next idea
Right.
and you're going to present it like a business person. Like, this
Right.
is why I think it would be a great asset for your brand.
Right. So I actually want to ask you this
Mm-hmm.
because what you said, you know, you want to share your ideas, but not share too much because
Yeah.
creators might sometimes share things and it's just like the
Sure.
brand might be like, oh, now we're not interested. And then they go and they
Yeah,
do it. So
themselves.
they do it themselves.
Yeah.
So, you know, let's say, for example, let's say it was Michaela and she was pitching
Mhm.
this lipstick to a lot of different brands, right?
Mhm.
What do you think are some things like how do you convey your ideas
Mm.
that they can understand what it is you are trying to do without sharing too much?
Sure. I think building stuff that has like a mood board. If you have other examples of content that you've already posted
Mhm.
where it feels similar, I think linking that content is great. At the end of the day, this happens in every industry. This happens to me all the time as a marketer, right? A brand approaches me, oh, we're interested in working together. Like, what would you do for our social? And I can't build them a whole social strategy, but I do
Right.
need to give them some reason to
Right.
want to work with me.
Right.
And a lot of times, unfortunately, it doesn't work out. Either I'm not in their price range or they decide to go with somebody else, whatever the reason might be. But I've then put time and effort into something that they can take somewhere else. And
Right.
I think that's just kind of part of being in a creative business.
Right.
Sometimes that's going to happen to you. And one thing I like to remind creators is that, and this feels a little bit harsh, but none of your ideas are truly, truly original. It's the way that you execute them that is
That's
original
true.
to you,
Yeah,
right? So
true.
while your idea of being a host or doing something else, other people have done that, there is no other you who can do it, who
Right.
has your knowledge, your eye, your perspective, your voice, your connections.
Right.
So that's what I always try and remind myself when I get passed over from a brand. Even if they execute my vision, it will never be
Yeah.
what I would have executed.
Right.
It'll never be as good.
Okay. You're not me, okay?
Yep.
So we're coming into a new year in 2024, and you know, like we've been talking about, you kind of have to evolve, and there's always different things that are going on with these social media platforms.
Yep.
What are some ways that you would suggest creators kind of think about themselves and their content going into a new year?
Every time we go into a new year, I feel like there's a lot of speculation, like what will be the next big thing, what should we
Mhm.
focus on, all of that. I think it's really important, kind of like I said before, to like really stay in your lane and
Mhm.
stay in your silo and
Mhm.
try to keep those blinders on and not get too sidetracked about like what is everybody else doing,
Right.
right? I always tell people when you look off of your paper, like you stop focusing on
Right.
what you're doing, that's when you drop the ball.
Yeah.
So really stay focused on what you feel comfortable with. In terms of tools, I think that are going to become big. I think TikTok Shop, there's no stopping it. Unfortunately, for some people, um, we're seeing this emergence of the true word creator economy through
Mhm.
TikTok Shop. Right?
Mhm.
Any single person who decides to be on TikTok Shop is now a creator.
Right.
Doesn't matter who,
Right.
doesn't matter if they have aesthetic, doesn't matter anything.
Right.
They can be making so much money through TikTok Shop just by linking these products,
Right.
right? So that takes competition very high in
Right.
the creator space, which is why being very specific as to what you are bringing to the table that is different
Mhm.
is so important. I don't think that TikTok Shop is for everyone, especially for creators who are already making brand deals, already in affiliate
Mhm.
groups. I don't think that that's something that they need to explore, but it's something you need to be aware of,
Right.
that people who have less followers than you can be coming on and making a buck, and they're taking part of your revenue share
Right.
at the end of the day. So bringing originality to the platforms
Mhm.
and a real voice
Right.
is more important than ever. I think this is something that's been talked about a lot this year, but it will continue to next year. Is the professional
Mhm.
will continue to be something that brands rely on heavily.
Mhm.
There is a space for the amateur, for the self-taught, but I do think that the professional, speaking to years of experience, certificates,
Right.
accreditation, training, I think when people show up, especially as makeup artists, they don't go into enough of
Right.
what makes you a professional makeup
Right.
artist, right? Whether
Right.
it is you got started at the clinique counter and you
Right.
worked up from there or something else, like
Right.
people want to know what makes you a professional
Right.
and what type of investment you've
Right.
done into your career, what have you worked on,
Right.
um, why should they listen to you?
Right.
And I think that's going to continue to be a huge point of communication for creators moving forward.
That's really good advice.
Thanks.
And oh, I wanted to say this too.
Yeah.
You kept saying, put your blinders off, don't really look at what
Mm,
other people are doing. That's the reason why my TikTok kind of grew last November, because
yeah.
I wasn't posting last November. I was like, you know
Hmm.
what? I was in this imposter syndrome kind of energy, and I listened
Sure.
to a sermon, and it was just like, all right, girl, you're gonna have to put some blinders on. And
Yeah.
that's when I finally started to grow my page.
That is so true. I tell people do not spend more time consuming than you spend creating.
Yeah.
Like your job at the end of the day is to create. It
Yeah.
is not to see what other people are doing. And there
Yeah.
is a place for getting inspiration, for
Yeah.
building community with other makeup artists, with
Right.
other people in the beauty industry. Of course, you should show up and be commenting other places. Um, but if you're spending more time doing that, like you're getting taken away from what you should be doing, which is
Right.
creating the content.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that putting the blinders on is a very difficult task,
Yeah,
but
it is.
I find that I try not to follow other people who are direct competitors to mine.
Mhm.
Um because you're never going to be in the same scenario as somebody else
Right.
either, right? Like I take care of my son 2 days a week. I
Mm,
have some help some days a week.
mm,
I have a different lifestyle than
right.
any other person
Right.
out there, and I can't compare myself to someone who is maybe younger and has less responsibilities and is doing other things.
Right.
Or at the end of the day, I also have to remind myself, like, where is my main income coming from?
Mm,
It's clients.
right.
I provide advice for creators for free. Lip service is free. The
Mhm.
texts are free. The group is free.
Mhm.
Everything that I do on social is free.
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, I need to make sure that I'm not losing focus, that just because I love to do that and it
Mhm.
fulfills me personally,
Mhm.
it doesn't do anything monetarily at this
Exactly.
point, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's fine because that's something that I have wanted to do,
Mhm.
which means that sometimes when I can't show up to create, that also has to be okay
Right.
because that means I'm showing up for a client that is paying the bills at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
literally, I just started posting again, and I was like, guys, anytime you see me disappear, it's because I'm actually like working as a
Working.
makeup artist,
Yeah, it's
and you
hard.
can't, like you said, you can't really compare yourself because your life is just different.
Yeah,
And like, of course, I show up to support my friends and comment on their stuff, but I find
sure.
myself way more inspired. Like, you should see my little notebook. I have so many ideas.
So
And I'm
many.
just like, girl, we already into 2024 with the amount of videos that you need to
Yeah.
record. So I think it's super powerful, like to just give yourself, like you actually just give yourself, it's kind of like mental clarity. You kind of like sweep
Mhm.
out all the noise because as you're scrolling, you're like, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea. And then you're confused and overwhelmed and
Yeah.
frustrated. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
I think, that's a great advice too, is, like, write down all the ideas you have, voice notes right away,
yeah.
whatever you need to do to capture any good idea at any moment, do it.
Do it.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much for making
Oh my
time.
gosh,
This was
thank you. This
amazing.
was so fun. It's so fun to sit down and chit chat.
I love this. And it's like actually in person. We also do
I
it over
know,
audio.
I know.
But, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and rate the podcast. I always say 5 stars for a 5-star guest, okay? And remember that you can watch this episode on YouTube, and we're also on TikTok and on Instagram at The Life of a Makeup Artist. And I'm not sure if but we have secret episodes, and we actually have a secret episode with Sonia.
Yay.
So don't forget to sign up for our backstage crew so you can hear more of what she's shared today in this episode. But I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye.